So here's another cursed design for you. Reverse trains. They don't go in reverse, but they do put the wagon first. Why would we want to put the wagon first? Because train stations cannot be put on bent rail, and wagons can only optimally be loaded or unloaded from straight rail. Fluid wagons just straight up can't be unloaded if they're on a bend. Put a locomotive at the back of the train, and you can park it at loading or unloading stations on a bent rail without any loss of access. And backfilling one train segment into the access curve allows for a smaller footprint on the station itself. By creating a test course comprised of a buffer yard, simulated smelting array, and simulated ore loading bay, and optimizing both for normal and reverse trains, I can show you that the loading and unloading stations can save a fair amount of footprint on traditional 3-wagon trains. Particularly 1-wagon trains have a much smaller footprint and can fit in almost anywhere. Also, the waiting bays don't need to worry about space for unloading the wagons, so the design is identical between normal and reverse trains, except the fuel loads at the opposite side. So if reverse trains can load and unload at a smaller footprint, why not use them everywhere? Well, Woob was crafty, and they created a system to try and prevent you from making trains like this. Atmospheric drag. Locomotives at the head of the train are streamlined, and therefore face less drag than wagons. Reverse trains are slower and less fuel efficient. Or are they? The acceleration and max speed bonuses granted by nuclear and rocket fuel negate the drag penalties almost entirely, allowing reverse trains to operate at an almost identical speed. I say almost because when a reverse train is not currently using fuel to move, the drag will now act on it differently, and that means that reverse trains slow down more quickly. And if you've played Factorio, you'd know the train braking speed is actually important enough to travel time that you want trains to be able to slow down as quickly as possible. Improving braking speed is even a research that you spend resources on. And this is where it gets really goofy, because train braking speed is enhanced by additional drag, and I can prove it. Time for a race. This circuit is just over 1,000 segments long. At a single push of a button, these two trains will depart simultaneously, stop at the next station for a single tick to advance the lap counter, lap the course, and then repeat until they reach the breakpoint of internal fuel, at which point they will stop at the first station, pausing their lap timer. This should provide a clear indication of the effect that different fuel types have on speed and fuel efficiency. We'll start with nuclear fuel. Don't you just love circuits? A quantum finish. Performance seems identical, but we can change the result by measuring it. The exact value in the memory cell was in favor of normal trains by just 6 ticks, 1/10 of a second. Normal trains accelerate faster and therefore pull ahead a bit early in the lap. But reverse trains catch up almost the entirety of this lead on their braking maneuver. Now for a duration test. By lap 6, the difference in performance is really starting to become evident. And I'm also regretting running this as a soak test because nuclear fuel lasts so long that the scale of this test is kind of irreducible. As you can see, even though at first glance the speed is about the same, the fuel efficiency difference is pretty massive. With nuclear fuel, the coefficient appears to be about 19%. I tried to calculate the difference in footprint, but the game really hates giving you whole numbers above 1,000, so here's a visual comparison. If you think this difference in footprint is worth at best a 19% increase in fuel cost to your trains, you may want to use reverse trains. But nuclear fuel is the best case scenario. It can only get worse. Let's try rocket fuel. The coefficient is actually better here, although I'm not discounting a margin for error. Now we'll run it with solid fuel. This is also a 19% coefficient. There is some difference in the internal fuel buffer, so that's a margin of error. Coal. Huge difference in the internal buffer this time, and the coefficient was around 22%. Wood. Exactly 20%. I feel pretty confident in saying that the drag coefficient is 20%. But this isn't exactly practical data. Thankfully, I've already set up a track for testing an application. We'll fill these trains with a set amount of fuel and then have them run ore back and forth until they run out, all the while reading the total amount of iron ore they shipped. We'll start with normal trains on solid fuel. This is your baseline. Even at 100 times speed, that took a while. With each wagon carrying 150 solid fuel and each station having 150 solid fuel in its buffer, they managed to move 6.66 million iron ore. Eerie. Alright, let's run it with reverse trains. Well, after almost 6 hours we have our result and... almost identical. 6.69 million iron ore. Nice. Of course, the track was slightly shorter to run because the stations were shorter. This accounted for a not insignificant boost in fuel efficiency, but the boost in braking may also have helped. We'll run it again on the same track. There we go, 6.34 million, a throughput difference of approximately 5%. I reran the first test with the clock installed, and what's interesting here is that the trains run out of fuel at just about the same time. The only difference made is the amount of ore shipped. Just because I like hitting this button, I'll test it with artillery wagons too. Wow, so, maybe don't do reverse trains for artillery. Maybe it's just the additional weight that makes the difference. Nope. If anything, all that additional weight improved the ratio. I guess it makes sense that having more weight behind the train would reduce the effects of drag, which is why 3 wagons full of iron performed similarly in both configurations. Late production clarification here. Train speed is governed by this equation. The value for air resistance is 0.01 for wagons and 0.0075 for locomotives. A 25% difference, which is in the neighborhood of my observed decreases in fuel efficiency. The air resistance value is then directly divided by 0.1% of the weight of the train, which functionally just converts them to simple one-digit values per rolling stock. So for a 1-wagon, 1-locomotive train, the equation for a normal train is all other factors multiplied by 0.998125, and for reverse trains it's multiplied by 0.9975. Honestly, I can't figure out how this math holds up against the data that I've tested. And it's just an equation for speed. However, it does verify that higher weight trains do have a direct impact on reducing air resistance. We could get lost in the weeds all day on calculating the exact impact of wagon-first trains, which is why I instead provided practical test data for you to draw your own conclusions. Late production epiphany here. I'm even smarter than I thought I was. I only noticed in editing that reverse trains pull ahead just a little bit on the first lap after ticking up the lap counter. So take a look. I retrofit the test course for constant braking. Each train will stop at every station along the lap. All 236 of them. Earlier when I said that I could prove that increased drag improved braking speed, I was honestly kinda talking out of my ass based on a vague observation. But check this out. On nuclear fuel, the reverse train pulls ahead. It starts to lap the normal train, and the fuel efficiency coefficient is like 4%. If nuclear trains stop frequently enough, performance is completely comparable. Might as well run it with other fuels. After 50 laps, the normal train on rocket fuel is barely ahead. Solid fuel seems to give reverse trains the advantage. Fascinating, since this is definitely how most people will fuel theirs. Back to normal trains for coal. I discovered the application of reverse trains a little over a year ago, and since they allowed for smaller one-wagon train stops, I used them here or there. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that the front wagon on a reverse train can only be unloaded by 6 arms in one direction. It's partially blocked by the train station on the right side. Overall, reverse trains are interesting and can have useful applications, but I struggle to recommend them to anyone and don't generally use them myself. After all, they are very ugly. And speaking of ugly,